Welcome to The Chat. Come behind the inbound scenes of some of the world's fastest growing companies. For the past 10 years as Chatmetrics, we've had an exclusive inside view of how these industry leaders are revolutionising inbound marketing and sales across diverse sectors. Each week, we bring you conversations with top minds in marketing and sales who share insider secrets and strategies for driving inbound success. Join us on The Chat, your front row seat to the future of inbound. So today on The Chat, I'm thrilled to welcome Rusty Stapp, a powerhouse in the world of revenue leadership. Rusty is a fractional CRO, VP of Sales and Business Development expert with over 25 years experience in driving revenue growth and navigating the most complex sales cycles in B2B and B2G industries. He's been instrumental in launching companies to new heights, streamlining go-to-market strategies, and creating millions in new revenue streams. From guiding sales teams through challenging multi-decision maker cycles to reshaping broken sales processes, Rusty has done it all. Beyond his professional acumen, he's a cancer survivor and a passionate advocate for men's health, as well as an avid cyclist. Rusty's insights will resonate with any marketing or sales leader looking to unlock revenue growth, overcome the hurdles of today's sales landscape. Rusty, welcome to The Chat. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks. I appreciate the time.
Look, I'd like to jump straight in and get right on topic for this one in particular. The silos in sales and marketing in that separation between the two departments. Why do you think the silos between sales and market and product persists in B2B companies when there's a clearly, that negatively impacts growth?
Yeah, I think this comes from just historical growth. I think if you look at companies, when I first got in my career 30 or 40 years ago, you could have a separate sales and marketing group. Marketing was supporting sales. I would say, again, in my early portion of my career, marketing was very much a support mechanism for sales. They were very siloed in what they were asked to do. It was some promotional material. It was trade show booths. We didn't have the complexity of outbound. We didn't have the complexity of constant communication and nurturing of customers. And so for many companies, that's how they grew. That's where they've been. Or if you have a senior leader that's been around for a while, that's what they experienced in their career. And that worked 30 years ago. That worked maybe 20 years ago. But buying now and the buyer journey for a B2B client it's a continuum. It's not, they go from here to here to here. There's very much a continuum. So by being siloed in sales and marketing, not really marching together as one, it prohibits that working that continuum in a positive manner. You run the risk of stops and starts losing the prospect. And I think if you're not tightly aligned and really working the whole process together, it makes it hard and you're at a disadvantage to your competition.
Do you think that organizations persist with that problem even though they know it negatively impacts growth?
I'm not sure everybody understands it impacts growth.
I'll rephrase that question. Why do you think they do? We know they do. Why do you think they persist?
Well, I think part of it's kingdom building, and people get into that. I think people have trouble changing paradigms sometimes, and not necessarily understanding how this buyer journey is today. I mean, even different than 5 or 6 years ago. I mean, the buyer journey's changing so much constantly that if a CEO and or the leadership of the company doesn't understand how their potential customers research them, find them, get to know their product or service, and then end up consuming it, then they run the risk of this historical, siloed type of environment. And then it makes it hard to make an impact on revenue generation.
How much of an impact does it have? I mean, when you get involved with businesses and able to break down these silos and bring it together, what, in your experience, how much of an impact does that actually have, that siloed environment?
Oh, well, it can be huge. I mean, and let's take the worst case scenarios. I mean, marketing's literally over here doing their positioning, doing their outbound reach. And they, and again, in historical level, they're looking at marketing qualified leads, and
Yeah.
that's all they're judging themselves on. That's maybe that's all they're reporting up to. Maybe they actually get compensated on. And so in that, they're not worried about revenue. They're not worried about really what becomes a sales qualified lead, what becomes a true customer. So it's very much a throw it over the wall. Hey, I did my thing, and then I throw it over the wall. So that
Mm.
doesn't help sales. Vice versa, if sales is not working with marketing, giving them good feedback. What's going on in the market? What did I see my competitor do inside my prospect? What am I hearing about needs from my customer? What messages are resonating? What messages aren't resonating? If you don't have those two together, then you can't make that impact. And it's left hand and the right hand not knowing what's going on. And I've seen very disjointed organizations in that sense. They're not working towards a common goal. At the end of the day, you would think, all right, everybody's about generating revenue, but if marketing's only, judged by how many marketing qualified leads and, how many click-throughs did we get in our email campaign, or how many unique web visitors did we get? We now call those vanity metrics, because that's how
Mhm.
they are.
Mm.
I can have, my open rate on my email was X. Well, okay. How many real leads did I get? How many demos did I do? How much revenue did I end up generating for that? At the end of the day, how much did all of that go to the end and really drive a bottom line impact to the company? Which is why, if you're disjointed and not working together arm in arm, then it's really hard to drive that business.
True, true. In terms of, say, percentage increases that you've seen of going from before with the silos to after, where an organization's actually in step and those critical customer facing departments are all in arm in arm, what sort of percentage improvements have you seen? Say, let's talk about revenue overall, because that's the ultimate.
Yeah, I mean, in going from a really bad case to improve, I've seen a 50% increase. Now, I
Wow.
can't promise that overall. I mean, you hope you're never dealing with one that there is that disjointed, but I've
Mm.
literally seen where people get together. And the third piece of this puzzle that I think I alluded once before to you is also the product team being involved in this. For these complex sales cycles that have a length of time, having the product team align with marketing and sales, because you're shooting at a point in time out in the future to close a deal. Could be 6 months, could be a year, could be 2 years. I mean, I've been in engagements where literally the start to the end is a 3-year cycle to
Mm.
recognize revenue. And having the product team together with your sales and marketing will definitely impact that too, because they're hitting that point in time when you're going to be delivering on your commitment to your customer. And that helps if they truly understand that, if they
Yeah.
can appreciate it, then it helps drive that product delivery process. It also gives them direct feedback in terms of as they're making product enhancements.
Mm.
I think the best product impacts I've ever had is where I started pulling product leaders directly into customers, because then they can appreciate truly what's going on. It's not just some salesperson yelling at them going, "Hey, I need this, I need this." And it's a noisy environment. If they can sit in front of a customer and truly see that, appreciate why that need is there, it really makes for a positive feedback loop inside of product development.
It's really interesting from our perspective because we get to deal with so many customers across different verticals. You start to get a sense pretty quickly as to how disjointed or how siloed their businesses are. We're able to see because we come in predominantly through marketing because marketing owns the website. But in fact, we operate as online salespeople. And so we need to have close involvement with the sales team as well, the sales leaders. And so we know you can almost tell the ones that sort of hold us in the marketing or hold us in the demand gen side without involvement from sales.
Right.
You get a sense and say, okay, there's some silos here. There's some motivations. In fact, with one of our clients, it was quite a difficult situation and a difficult conversation I had to have. They were doing things that were, they had a chatbot on the front of our service that was asking for an email address before they would let a person come through to chat with a human being.
All right.
And we know from experience that can have anywhere up to a 96% drop off of people that want to actually talk to sales.
Wow.
Nearly 100% will drop out. And it was virtually an argument, and I had to give an ironclad guarantee that I would actually pay if she got less emails. Her KPI was emails.
Right.
That's why she wanted emails up front. Her KPI was emails, and she was so siloed in that view that she had to get emails. And that was our job, was to deliver emails, when in fact our job was to qualify and deliver booked meetings. I promised her that we'll get you more emails than having this pre-qualification question. And we did. It was a quadruple increase in the number of that. But that's a classic example where you've got a person in a business that's so focused on their individual KPIs that it's having a negative impact on the overall revenue of the organization. And this person was in a junior demand generation role. So it's
Well, and you're right. Again, getting all that alignment. And I'll give you another example. I was working for a major chemical company, and the R&D team was incentivized on patents that they filed. They got bonuses at the end of the year. They got awards and stuff. Didn't matter whether the invention was sellable or not. That was not part of the criteria. It was about whether the patent was granted out there. And none of these R&D people had ever met a customer before. I mean, some of these people had been in the business for 25 years, never met a customer. I started dragging a PhD head of R&D out with me to go see major customers. My R&D roadmap changed in 6 months. Suddenly, it was no longer just about filing patents. Suddenly, they could tie these things to customers, and they actually got enjoyment out of it. They were like, "Oh wow, I'm not just inventing things to invent things. I'm inventing things that a customer's going to use." And I made a huge change in my revenue, just a result of being able to tie them together. So, yeah, I mean, when the KPIs are silo driven and not helping the overall organization, it makes it challenging to really run an efficient ship.
Okay, so the big question that comes out of all of this then is, how do we fix it? What are the first steps? And there's obviously the baby steps and first steps that leaders need to take to resolve it. What are the first steps that leaders need to take to resolve this issue?
Well, so I think you and I both alluded to, are there KPIs that are only serving one organization, one group? And do they really need to be there? Can we build a set of KPIs that are more inclusive of everyone? Yes, you need to have some department KPIs, no doubt about it. But how do you build a set of KPIs that brings everyone together and everyone wanting to deliver on? I also think it can be an organizational structure. On the sales and marketing side, I'm a big proponent of, a CRO or someone like that who organizationally owns sales and marketing together. Now, you have senior leaders on both of those sides, but in that sense, then there is one executive sitting there owning that go-to-market and It's not about marketing protecting themselves or sales protecting themselves. It's about a complete delivery from start to finish.
Yeah.
So I think KPIs and organizational structure are the two key items that you start making a big impact here.
And what have been the biggest obstacles that you found when you're involved in an organization and helping them go through this process? What are the biggest obstacles that stop them from being able to get to that alignment between sales, marketing, and product?
Yeah, part of it is again what they've lived in past organizations. I mean,
Mm.
sales did this, marketing did this, and so thinking about it in a new way, it's hard for people to make that leap. Even when you can produce reports by Gartner and McKinsey showing about how the buying journey is changing out there in the market, some people have a hard time accepting that change. I even use the analogies of think about how you purchase things today, the consumer, your consumer purchases compared to the way you did 5 to 10 years ago.
Mm.
Those things impact our B2B journeys, just like you going to Amazon and buying something now. You go and Google and look at some reviews and you look at a couple of websites, and then you go buy it online. Did you talk to anyone? You probably did. That same buying methodology, you know, permeates right into a B2B environment. And that's what we see now on B2B engagements.
It's really interesting. Um, it's the human piece, isn't it? It's it's you talk about change management, but it's actually the human piece, that psychology of this is the way we've always done it. The natural
Hmm.
resistance to change. The difficulty in thinking a new way is really just that natural resistance to change, because it puts us often in uncomfortable situations, unfamiliar surroundings.
Right.
Um, the change management piece, how much of that from a when you're involved and effectively running through a project of bringing these silos together, how much of a formal change management piece is there in your planning preparation?
Well, so it depends on what that change is. I do try to, walk before we run. Rarely will you find an organization that's ready to just go do wholesale changes, unless there's been a CEO change and the CEO's come
Mm.
in and mandated something. So I'm usually looking for those small changes that get people comfortable with change
Yeah.
before you start doing something big, and try to introduce the the justification for it. Maybe it's how we do outbound. Maybe it's just how it can be as simple as implementing a CRM. I still run into enterprise clients who are living in a spreadsheet and tracking their opportunities there. It's hard to believe in this day and age that it happens. So, I try to start looking for those smaller changes that are impactful, that then breed bigger wholesale changes. Again, short of a major executive changeover, I think that's the way people can come.
So one of the examples you gave earlier of that is that what you're talking about, for instance, where you take the leader of the R&D team out into the market to actually meet customers. I like the way in my mind, it was almost like guerrilla change management. It's like, okay, let's go and just
It,
do some bits and pieces here. And you might find that, the really big changes in terms of organizational change and structure change is not necessary if you get the right people into the right
Mhm.
mindsets, and then you get an outcome in terms of everybody working together naturally, as opposed to being, ground up rather than being forced from the top down.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I took over sales and marketing for a mid-tier SaaS company, of which the product management people had never sat in front of a customer before.
Mm.
And I was amazed. I'm like, it's product management. You people should be living in front of customers.
Mm. Mm.
And so you're right. I think just it doesn't have to necessarily be a major formal change. It's just giving people buy-in to
Mhm.
being able to willing to do things differently.
Do you think that, in your experience, is heavily weighted towards big business, government, and enterprise size organizations? Do you think that there is a fundamental difference in the types of people and what their expectations are in terms of the whole process, from identifying a problem, researching who the potential providers are, looking for an outcome? I mean, is there, I guess what I'm asking is, do you think there's a difference between a person that's doing that in enterprise versus a person that's doing that in a smaller organization?
No, I don't. I think it more has to do with the type of product or service they're acquiring.
Mm.
I think it has less to do with the size of organization they work.
Yeah.
So anything that is going to be, and let's say it's a financial management piece of software for the company. Whether you're a $5 million USD company or a $500 million USD company, the purchasing process is pretty similar, in terms of research, knowledge. I mean, there's a framework that I like to use with my customers around nurturing a potential customer, and it's called the 7-11 4. So it's 7 hours of content across 11 pieces and 4 mediums to really help them understand what you do, why you do it, and why it's important. That's irrespective of whether they're a $5 million entity or a $500 million entity.
The 7-11 4. I like that. I like that.
Yeah,
It's good.
it came from Google. I would love to take credit for that.
Hmm.
But and I don't live in the absolute, but I think the general framework of it is you need a lot of touch points in different ways for people to trust you, to know you, to be comfortable working with you, to want to engage you in a human to human connection.
Yeah.
And so I encourage anyone I'm working with or just talk to, try to do things like that. And again, that's different. When I started my career 30 years ago in sales, you know, I joke, I asked marketing for a couple of things. I asked them for the one-page slick. I asked them to make sure the trade show booth looked good and make me some giveaways to go give away to the customer. And that's all I asked them, you know. And now that's different. Now there is all of this nurturing that needs to be done just to get that customer to a point where you can truly work them through the sales cycle.
Mm-hmm. And particularly with very long sales cycles, this account-based nurturing is critical. Back onto the piece with regards to the fundamentally the human beings don't change between large and small, and their own processes they follow. Obviously, there'll be processes within their organisation, procedures that they've got to follow from a procurement perspective. I found recently that we've done some research on some e-commerce websites, particularly around in the area of what we do, but it almost seems as though the whole idea of marketing in an e-commerce environment is so much more focused and refined on getting revenue outcomes than what the whole B2B world is. And look, there's some islands of excellence, but they are that. They're small, remote
Right.
islands. Generally across B2B, it's almost like that initial experience is quite shocking. And for me, it's crystallized in the last 24 months as we've been doing this research. And I think it's because that in an e-commerce environment, the marketing team see almost immediate consequences of their actions. They see immediate revenue. For them, the outcome is a basket checkout. Whereas the marketing team in B2B, it's this longer term, unfuture consequence. They're delivering a potential prospect into a pipeline or a sales process that will take some amount of time before they actually see the results, the end point, the revenue of their actions. And sure,
Right.
there's step points and indicators along the way that can tell whether or not that deal's going to close and whether or not they're a good fit for the organization. So it brings it back closer, but it's not the immediacy that the e-commerce industry has.
Right.
And yet the people are no different. You go and buy, you go and shop online. It's the same person shopping online getting an e-commerce experience as it is someone's doing research, on your business to whether or not you can solve their problem. It's I just think there's this huge gap between the e-commerce and B2B businesses at the moment from a marketing perspective. And I've seen recently a couple of e-commerce marketers, very senior e-commerce marketers, move into B2B businesses and start to shake things up a bit. And the impact's been quite extraordinary as far as a pipeline build and revenue perspective has been.
Yeah. Well, depending on the study you look at, it says that in a B2B environment, there's only 3% of our prospects that are really in a buying mode at that time. So, it's like you've alluded to, it's about playing the long game and nurturing is the key, right? It's about continuing to nurture all of those prospects and targets over time so that, when they are in a purchasing mode, you're at the front of the pack.
Can you give us or talk us through a time where you've been involved with an organization that's had to do the more extreme in terms of a restructure and what that process was like, and what the outcomes were? And I mean, the outcomes, not just for revenue, but for the entire organization, because something like that can have a big impact on the culture of an organization.
Yeah. Well, and I have been through them where we've had to restructure our channel strategy, change, how we're going to market, how we're supporting customers in that way. I would say, and again, I'll come back to the specialty chemical stuff that I was doing. We were very innovation product oriented, not solution customer oriented. And so we made some changes both in product development, as I talked about here, and really got the R&D team bought in. We put a lot more of a support structure in for customers and helping them to develop solutions. So it wasn't just about us out innovating our competition, which I think can be a hard road. I always think of, there's kind of 3 different models of how you want to be best in class. You can out innovate all of your competition. That's great. That's a hard road. We see NVIDIA doing that right now. I think they're a great example, in the semiconductor space. Intel used to be that person. You can be very customer intimate and customer centric and really be thinking about the customer and how you do that. Or you can be the cost of ownership leader like that. And it's not necessarily about acquisition cost, but the total cost of ownership out there. I've always thought that the customer intimate model was the one that's more sustainable and is more company and process oriented out there. Your cost structures, depending on the type of business you're on, can be whipsawed by suppliers or other things going on. Innovation is about out innovating, and it's an expensive and hard one. So when I've gone into organizations and really needed to reduce stuff, it's about building that customer intimate model. And that's what I did with this chemical company. And we were able to turn an unprofitable business around to making over $6 million in an 18-month period. And it was about putting more solution-oriented people right there at the customer. It was about getting the R&D team aligned with customer problems. And I actually massively reduced our channel strategy because we were too far away from the customer. We had a channel in front of us that we were not as close to the customers we needed to be. And as we got closer to the customer, we learned more, we became better at delivery, we were solving their problems better. And so that's probably the biggest one, right? The largest organizational change that I've ever made. And then the resulting impact that happened.
Because I'd imagine changing channels like that, moving and moving closer to the customer, there's a fair amount of cost that can actually come with that, with the additional resources
Yep.
required
Yep.
to
There's,
achieve it.
yep, absolutely. It does bear you more cost. But in this case, this was an early stage technology development. So there was a lot of needing to be close to the market, helping to help them understand how to maximize the value for it. I think when you're in a more established market and in a more established brand, being farther away from the customer is okay. You know, if I'm Salesforce and want to sell CRM, I have a lot of integrators out there, right? But if I'm doing a brand new AI solution in a segment that traditionally hasn't had AI type of automation, I think you got to be closer to your customer, trying being farther away and helping them understand value and solving their problems. I think it's harder to drive revenue that way.
Yeah. I agree. As far as the that particular example that you gave, with the additional cost, that must have been a pretty big uplift in revenues then. What do you think? I mean, getting closer to customers and understanding, I get that, but was it a combination? Where was the biggest impact? Was it the fact that your sales team were able to directly engage with the customers and, I guess, to a certain extent, be somewhat more motivated than a channel partner, so to speak, or the fact that product were involved now and actually innovating to solve customers' actual problems, and almost that land and expand where you've got some relationship there with the customer, then you're starting to broaden the amount of products that you've got with that customer.
Right. So we end up shortening the sales cycle over time because we were closer to the customer. We were solving a problem quicker for them as opposed to being away from them. And you're
Mm,
right. By R&D improving our product line, I had more things to sell than to the customer.
mhm,
The problem I had before was R&D was very, innov- our innovation focused, not customer focused. So some of the things I couldn't sell to the customer. I mean, literally was not going there. I had them do some very me too products that had high revenue impact for me. And I could pull those things along by taking the innovative products and the bread and butter products and sell them as a package. And it ended up making, a very good top end growth as a result of that.
mhm. And so in that situation, I guess, and overall, how do you balance the competing priorities of sales needing immediate wins, or always looking for immediate wins,
Mm.
because that tends to be the driving force behind
Right.
sales, and then marketing, which are focused on a more, longer term brand growth, and then product concentrating on feature development, which can often be a future state
Mhm.
as well. How do you get that balance?
Well, and it depends on the business
Mm,
and that market and what that cycle is. What's my dev cycle? And you're right. You can't take your eye off the near term because you got to be continuing to create revenue. So there's always a significant portion of your cycles and effort making sure you're working that funnel and meeting the revenue goals out there. But, you know, I think it's just like anything else. You've got to make sure and carve out time for the rest. So you can't let, hey, I got to close the numbers for this quarter, not allow next quarter's growth, next year's growth, 24 months growth, not happen. And I think you've always got to be having some of those efforts going on for the medium and long term. And that should be part of your KPIs.
mm,
Well, am I developing my message? Am I working with product to pull things through commercialization? I've helped implement commercialization processes in companies. And in that, sales and marketing are part of commercialization. It's not just a product.
mm.
And in that, yeah, how's our commercialization schedule going? Are we moving things through our commercialization gates? Because if so, that's your long-term investment there.
Yeah.
And so, you want to make sure those things are happening along with the other components that are driving short and near and medium term growth.
Yeah, I guess it's the overall strategy, isn't it, in terms
No.
and depending on the organization and the market. What role does leadership play in fostering collaboration across sales, marketing, and product?
So I think leadership again should be making sure that the KPIs match, that everybody's going together. I mean, again, I think the siloed KPIs are what will drive people apart and
Mm,
have them only thinking about what makes them successful. I mean, there's been in the news, who was the company? I'm sorry, I'm forgetting it. There was a deal in the news this week about one company having 100 and something million shipping cost, not on their balance sheet. That's because someone in the shipping department was not recognizing the shipping cost. And one of the thoughts was the reason they didn't do that is their KPI was to lower shipping cost.
right.
And so literally they were not reporting it into the financials there so that the profits of the business unit looked better like that. And I think that's assuming that is what was going on with this organization. That's a classic example. You got a KPI that is silo oriented that makes them think about them, not the organization.
Yeah.
Uh,
And in
so
fact, actually, probably potentially driving the opposite behavior to what you really
right,
want.
a negative behavior, exactly.
Correct.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
I think the KPIs are important. That I'm always I've always said this when I've been part of an organization as I'm leading. It's like, be very clear about what the goals are. And then how do you enable the groups to go meet those goals? And you know, how do you enable them to do that and then get out of their way?
Mm.
You should have people in organizations that have the ability to go meet their goals. And what are you doing to enable that? And I've been lucky enough to have leadership that has done a really good job at that before.
You mentioned before framework 7-11-4.
Hmm.
What other tools or frameworks do you recommend for improving communication and collaboration between the departments? Is there any?
Yeah, well, I mean, tools like a CRM. I've been living in CRMs before, Mr. Benioff had Salesforce.com and everything
Mhm.
like that. I mean, for an organization not to have a CRM, I think you're still back in the Stone Age. So you've got to have a tool and live by it. Not just I mean, it should be a decision tool. It's not just a recording tool, it's a decision tool. I'm a big believer in having a very tight ICP, an ideal customer profile.
Mhm.
The thing that I'll put on top of an ICP is I actually do a scoring ICP inside of all organizations. So, scoring ICP is you've got your 5 criteria. Let's say it's 5 criteria for your ideal customer. So you're not just going to name what that is, but literally as a prospect comes in, you're going to score against that ICP. So Terry, in criteria 1, well, maybe you're a 2. You don't really value that key component of what we do. In criteria, the second criteria is your budget approved. Well, it is, but it's only up to a certain level. What's your ICP look like? And then I score against those literally so that you then got some type of quantifiable measure to look at
Mm.
opportunities out there. And then where do you go put your resources? Because at the end of the day, the things that most align with your ICP is what your organization should be chasing, not logos, not, hey, this is a $10 million deal and I've got 5 $2 million deals out here. Well, if the 5 $2 million deals, you got a 90% chance of winning, and the $10 million deal, you got a 2% chance of winning. Where do you go put your chips? You go after
Yeah.
the smaller deals and go improve your probability here.
Yeah. And that
So
ICP
ICP,
scoring allows you to give you that ability to target and put the resources where you're likely
yeah,
to get the best outcomes.
and it's not
Return on
perfect.
investment.
Yeah, yeah, and it's not perfect, and it gets better over time because you still have a human bias as part of it from the scoring system.
Mhm.
But over time, you'll find with an organization, it'll get better and better. And then it really becomes a decision tool out there for you to understand where to put resources, where are your best opportunities. It helps finance understand how to forecast. Because at the end of the day, sales and finance should be closely tied so that they can do their job. It's a structure that can really help you up and down the line in terms of driving revenue.
When you get this alignment in place, what is the impact, or what is the actual enhancement that happens from a customer experience perspective?
Yeah. Yeah. It's fun because you can see that the customer truly gets, they feel like you understand their problems and that you're truly a partner helping them to solve their problem. You're not just a vendor. You're not just selling a product or service. You're there truly solving their problems. And you do become a partner with them. And I've been lucky enough. I've been part of some organizations where we have been able to get this alignment, to get that level of execution between the departments. I was part of one company, and inside of 4 years, we took the company from a $27 million company to $100 million. And we're an electronics company in the U.S. competing against then the Japanese, which were the king of electronics. Yet we were taking market share consistently. And so for someone like me in a go-to-market role, that's the fun side. That's when it really gets fun. When you get that alignment, it's that state of flow that you hear about with organizations and people and stuff. Everybody's marching together, everybody's executing, and it's a 1 + 1 = 3 at that point.
And you do see it from a customer's perspective. They're experiencing coming through. If you put yourself in their shoes, all of a sudden they're looking at an organization that everyone's looking to solve their problem and everyone's looking to help them. There's no internal conflict. There's no, you can see one department not necessarily wanting to make a change or get on board, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
You just feel like you've got this powerhouse on your team that's helping you be more successful from a customer's perspective. So it's
there's no finger pointing, and unfortunately, I've been in organizations where support's pointing the finger back at implementation. It's not our fault; it's their fault, and the customer feels that. And so if you're not aligned and working together, then the customer understands that. They're not stupid.
Absolutely, absolutely, and that in itself, the customer experience, I think in this particular times that we're talking about now, I know it's been more at the front of mind for go-to-market teams, for executives, both sales and marketing executives, marketing teams. It's the customer experience is almost becoming the point, or a very much a point of differentiation, or it's beyond that now. I think it's almost a ticket to the game. If your customer's not going to have a good experience in dealing with you, then you're going to be on the back foot from the start. You mentioned earlier that you're a great proponent of, a CRO role, or chief revenue officer, where marketing and sales sit under the one. What's your concept? What's your take on the concept of, say, a revenue team that integrates sales, marketing, and customer success under one umbrella?
Yeah, so I think it depends on the type of customer you're servicing and your product and service. I think that's great, and I would be a proponent of it in most cases. Again, it just really depends on the type of customer you're servicing. But I think an organization that's looking at the customer and how to service them from, early stage, all the way through the life cycle, should sit under a single leadership, because again, then there's none of silos. It's about marching together and being able to do that and deliver that customer and support them wholeheartedly.
Look, I tend to agree. I think that it's too much of a risk and too easy that if the head of one of those departments changes, that then can upset the apple cart because of personality types or ego or ambition. As you said before, it's the individual empire building, for instance, that could too easily dismantle all of that good work that's been done to remove those silos.
Well,
Unfortunately,
and
I've seen that happen.
yeah, well, and to me, again, it comes back to the KPIs being misaligned. I've seen these silos there, and it becomes like, well, that's not coming out of my budget. That should come out of your budget. Well, no, it's not coming out of my budget. That was someone else's problem. And then everybody's worried about their budgets and things like that, as opposed to what's best for the customer at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And I've been involved in organizations like that, and the customer feels it. They know that things are not smooth on the supplier end. And you've got to find ways to get rid of those things.
Yeah. Yeah. And look, and I think that's where the structure plays such an important part, both in setting KPIs and then, managing and controlling that way the organization interacts between itself and then the customer base from there.
Right.
How should companies approach messaging to ensure consistency across sales, marketing, and product touch points?
Yeah, again, I think messaging these days, and I've alluded to it a little while ago, this is so much a nurturing. I think messaging these days is very much about this is less the hard sell and much more these days, how do you help solve problems? How do you inform? I think that type of messaging is much more beneficial these days than the hard sell. I think thinking about the whole call to actions, we always had to have so many of them on a website and blah. I would argue that less of that needs to happen now. That, there are some studies from McKinsey, that will show a potential customer will go 80% through the buying cycle before they want to talk to anyone. So the whole call to action and thing like that, I think needs to be lessened. And I think nurturing the prospect out there, and, solving problems. How are you going to solve the problem? How do you build the trust? All of those components are what's important these days in driving customers to your solution.
Look, you said it earlier, it's becoming that trusted advisor, really. And if you can set the organization up to give the customer that experience of that you're operating in that environment of being a trusted advisor, as opposed to trying to close the deal or ABC, always be closing, through call to actions and capturing email addresses and so forth. We've seen some pretty big results come through. Had a client that joined us a year ago. Their website was very much focused on call to actions, driving people into a funnel. Everything was gated in terms of information, and they weren't getting. There was an extraordinarily low conversion rate. My concern was that the quality of the traffic was in fact quite low, and that's why the conversion rate was low. We went live, and using our normal process where we don't ask for any emails or any contact details up front, all of a sudden, all of this information started to come through from the conversations, and the number of chats and the number of conversions we were delivering turned what was a very low converting website to one of our highest converting websites. The traffic was extraordinary quality, but they were just being so focused on having everything gated to try and thinking that the value of what they were giving in terms of the information while people are doing their research was so high that people would be putting their contact details out. It was a non-reality. So in seeing those conversations, they went through and ungated about 98%. I think there's still 2% of the information they had on there, and it's just changed their complete revenue flow. It's literally tripled revenue for that organization in the course of 18 months.
That's fantastic.
Simply because they've allowed. And it's not all coming through the chat. Now that they've got all of this information open, then there's inquiries coming through the website through their normal processes with, contact us and demo and all that sort of stuff. But it was discovered because we opened up the gates with the live chat, and the insights with live chat, and it's the old, I'm not selling here, but the reality is when you let somebody come to a website and have a conversation where you have no expectation in return and you're simply answering their questions, it creates a very detailed conversation that you can gain enormous insights from.
Well, and I think what you just alluded to is you have to think about how to do things different. It's not the same world we lived in before. So everything behind a wall, capturing, contact information and all that stuff. It's a different buying environment right now. And, this is what we hope, both you and I, that clients will take a look at and be willing to try something different because this is what we're seeing in the market.
Exactly. And again, it still comes back to that component that underlines, and it seems it doesn't matter who I speak to, it's all got the same underlying component, and that is that we're dealing with human beings. This is a person to person transaction. I can see the day where there'll be a lot more AI involved than there is at the moment, and that's probably coming sooner rather than later. But the reality is, it's still human beings that are having those two-way conversations at this point in time.
Well, and the human, and the human has just decided they want a different level of interaction, and so that's what we have to adapt to.
Exactly. So, how do you help teams avoid or move away from territorial thinking? I get it. There's KPI. You can change KPIs, but there's got to be underlying conversations to take place and shift to a mindset of shared goals. There's a step between setting KPIs and people actually being bought into that process.
Yep. And my experience has been usually breaking down that silo means you need to have cross organizations involved in the other one's life. And so I gave you examples of R&D people I've taken out to customers, product managers sitting in front of customers. I think, having, product and marketing people literally involved in the sales call gives an appreciation for what's going on. I also think having regular dialogue of a group of salespeople back to marketing. Well, what's going on in positioning? What's going on in messaging? And having the dialogue there so that, marketing can say, well, we're doing this, this, and this, and sales can go, well, here's why I think that works, or here's why I don't think it works. I think trying to create some type of circular feedback loop helps break that down as opposed to people just sitting in their box and doing that. So like when I've ever done account reviews, there is marketing sitting there. There's product management. There's product people. There's finance sitting there. Because I want the other teams to appreciate what goes on in the day-to-day sales environment, the good, the bad, the ugly. And that they get to ask questions. They get to offer input. And that it's not just such a black box for them out there, that they can see what's going on, because I think that then helps them appreciate what goes on in that revenue cycle out there.
Yeah. Do you, look, AI seems to be permeating all of our lives almost everywhere these days. Do you think that the rise of AI and automation impacts the need for a closer alignment between the teams?
Absolutely. There's a lot of people using AI very poorly right now. I'm not a big fan of the personalization tools going on out there because I don't see them being used well. I think they could be used well, but I see more bad examples of them. And I've written about this a couple of times on LinkedIn, and I use examples of cold emails that have been sent to me that are just, they're masking as personalized and authentic when they're obviously using an AI tool that's scraping my LinkedIn profile, scraping my website, and it's completely out of context. And I think an over reliance on these tools ends up hurting your brand more than helping your brand. I think that they're definitely helpful. I mean, I use them every day. I use ChatGPT, I use Perplexity, but they are a tool to get there. They're not a replacement for things.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's about leveraging them rather than relying on them. It's interesting. From my perspective, I think a message is much more important to be relevant than personalized. But everybody has different
I agree.
personalities too.
I agree. Yeah, and I'm a proponent right now of cold outreach can be generic, but it needs to be relevant. It needs to be relevant to the problem you're solving, to the person you're solving it for. Trying to personalize down to Terry went to university at so-and-so, and try to make a connection like that. The likelihood you're going to get it right is, you got a 10% chance, I think, at best. And you got a 90% chance of it being completely off, which then kills the rest of your message.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and right now in the campaigns that I'm running that are cold, they are very direct on a pain point for a potential buyer out there. And those are the ones where we're getting good feedback, we're getting good engagement and things like that. I wouldn't even attempt to try to go do one of these automated AI personalized for what Mary, job was 3 years ago. And I think it's too fraught with problems right now.
Yeah. I agree. And particularly now with all of the technical side of emailing and deliverability and spam filters, and the big service providers are really trying to cut down on spam, and it's almost like the world of sales is trying to increase spam. So it's a never-ending fight. But look, I think the one good thing about email is that I mean, unless you're doing the wrong thing, as long as you've got your technical side set up properly and you're doing the right thing, then you'll always get through, because email is like the new old letters being sent between people. It's a way, it's a basic form of communication now. So the ISPs have to be a little bit careful. The ISPs, the email providers need to be a little bit careful to make sure that they're not blocking valid and relevant communications between individuals as well. So,
well, I just ran an email campaign for a client, and it was very narrowly focused. We had a very narrow subset of target clients in terms of size of company, a very narrow set of job descriptions that we did. And we were in a three email sequence there. And we went from a 12% open rate to a 65% open rate by the end. And again, this was about solving a very relevant problem for this discipline inside the company. And so I think you can do things like that are still strong campaigns and can be good for your brand and your market.
Yeah. I agree entirely. If you could give one piece of advice to a CEO that's looking to align sales, marketing, and product, what would it be?
Wow. So I'm big on process. So I would say, please have processes. Please have, what's your nurturing process? What's your sales process? And really live by them, and it's always good to challenge them. They will need to change over time to your market, to your product, and things like that. But have a process. Don't just chase things to chase things. Discipline and process will win out in the long term, always over whack-a-mole. And so those are the things that I always want a CEO to think about, especially if they don't come from a go-to-market side. If they come from a finance side or product development side, especially a product development side. I say, hey, would you go develop product without an agile method or something like that? No. Well, sales is no different. Generating revenue is no different. It needs a process. It needs to be defined. You need to have steps. You need to have criteria for how you have go, no goes. and it will yield itself in the end.
Yield itself in what way?
Not just top line, but a bottom line. This will yield you profits at the end. There's no doubt about it. I always joke, anybody can grow top line, right? You can give stuff away and not give stuff away, but you can heavily discount things.
Sure.
You can grow
Yep.
top line, but you can lose money. With a process that's well-defined and iterates on what is successful, you will grow your profits. No doubt about it, because you'll be focused on the right things. You'll be developing the right products. You'll be delivering them to the right customers, and you will be efficient about how you do those things. And there's no doubt that you will be a more profitable company in the end.
You have been a fractional sales leader for a while. What was it that inspired you to specialize in fractional sales leadership?
Yeah, well, I would love to tell you that there was a great plan for doing it. It was just kind of thrust upon me at one point. I had a division. I was with a company that got acquired. The division unfortunately got shut down kind of very quickly after acquisition. And I had a couple of companies approach me that, hey, we'd like your help, but we don't really need full time, nor can we afford it. And hence was born my fractional business.
Mhm.
And I enjoy it because I get to help more than one company out at a time. I enjoy the fact that I get to bring my level of experience and leadership to companies that typically can't afford it. You know, the beauty of the fractional model is for a company that isn't either ready or can't budget wise afford a senior level go to market person. You get that level of experience and knowledge at a price point that meets what you do.
Mm.
And so I get to do it. And you know, I have a little bit of ADHD. I like to see more things at once and do a lot of things. So this scratches one of my itches that I'm involved in more than one company, and you know, it keeps my inquisitive engineering nature going out there.
Yeah, very good. Very good. So being across a number of businesses, and from a fractional perspective, I guess it's very important from an organization's perspective to start to see some results pretty quickly. How do you bring immediate impact to the organizations that you work with?
Yeah. So it's always about what's the near term revenue that needs to happen. So it's not taking your eye off the ball. You definitely want to be making some sustainable foundational work in the organization, but it's how are we going to close out the business that's there? What's in the funnel? What's in the near term revenue goals? So I always make sure we do that. And then I start looking for what part of the foundation hasn't been developed. And there's typically something. There's usually a lack in sales process because they haven't had a senior level person there. So how do we start developing a process? What are the other components that need to start being developed over time so that we get the sustainable path out there for revenue?
Yeah.
I always joke, you know, I run sales marathons companies. So how do we make sure at mile 26 that we are winning in doing what we want? We got to hit the near term stuff. We got to hit the 1K. We got to hit the 2K. But then how do we go out there and really do well in mile 26?
And that starts at the 1 and 2K mile point, doesn't it?
It does. It does. And so it's about working the combination of the two and really getting a good ground, you know, laying the groundwork so that we build a foundation for them to go succeed. I mean, and I tell all my clients, my goal is to work myself out of the job. You know, I want to make them so successful that the fractional role now needs to be a full-time role. And then I help them go do that. Help them find the person, get the handoff done, and we watch them grow. And for me, that's an all success story.
What do you think is the most important thing a sales leader should do in their first 90 days in a role? And you know, we're digging down a little bit into the details here, but it's just, I think that there's some insights based on your experience across a broad a range of industries that might really help the audience here. Well, what do you think
Yeah.
those?
Yeah. I mean, it's closing that near-term revenue. Then it's doing analysis. Why are you winning and why are you losing? And the latter's equally as important as the former. People will get very caught up in, oh, we just had company A buy this, we had company B, so we need more of company A and B. Okay, well, that could be true. But why did you lose the other three deals that you thought were going to happen? Because
Mhm.
there's as much learning that happens from the losses and a post-mortem around those as there are on the wins. Because, the joke is the wins can have you believe in your own BS, where the losses, if you can truly understand why that happened, may be a better learning for what builds your business. So I always try to quickly do an analysis on both sides of the house. Because again, that's part of building that foundation there.
Mm. It's always interesting for me, how people find their path. Your example with regards to the organisation changing and your department being closed. You mentioned about ADHD and obviously the desire to get your finger across a number of things coming through. Personal question incoming. Can you share your personal experience with cancer and how that shaped your leadership style and priorities?
Yeah. Well, it does help you put a perspective on things. So, 13 years ago, I was diagnosed with stage 4 inoperable prostate cancer. Literally out of nowhere.
Yeah.
I was a young guy. It wasn't supposed to happen to me. And through, wonderful support, great set of doctors, and a fair bit of luck, I beat completely on the other side of it. What it does for me personally today is there's a lot of resilience out there. You get that death notice, and you find a way to fight through it. You kind of go, well, I can fight through anything now.
Mm.
I beat cancer, so the business is not doing good. All right, we're gonna go figure this out. That customer didn't close like we thought it was. All right, it's not that big a deal. We're gonna go find the next one. It also tends to put things in perspective
Mm.
for you realize that the work losses or the work challenges are just stuff. They're just work. Right? The personal side and the fact that it all can go away for you at a point in time, it is a much more important thing in life.
Yeah. Mm. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Appreciate it. It's one of those things that there's personal life challenges can have a huge impact on. So would you say that before then you were less resilient? That you were less?
No, I no, I was definitely think I was very resilient, which is what helped me go fight through that. Um, Out there, I think it just further cemented that resiliency in me, and how it then bears itself in everything that I do.
Mm. Mm. Brings it up to the surface. Okay,
Yeah,
that's good.
yeah, absolutely,
Thanks for sharing that. Thanks for sharing that.
absolutely.
So, what would be the one piece of advice that Rusty would give 18-year-old Rusty today and back then?
Uh, yeah, go try a lot of things. Yeah, I think it's a great way to figure out what you're good at. Yeah, I hear people say, "Hey, go do what you're passionate about." Well, I would love to be a professional cyclist winning the Tour de France, but I don't know what I'm good at. I think go out and find ways to fail when you're young, because the downside's not that big a deal. You don't have a mortgage, you're not supporting a family. If that career or that move to another city, trying another job doesn't work, you know what? The downsides are not really you think the downsides are a lot worse than they really are. And I didn't go do a lot of that when I was younger. But I think about the learnings that I got when I did get to a better point in my life of doing that, and just the doors it opens for you, the things that you learn, the experiences you get out of it. Failure's fine. You know what?
Mm.
The downside of failure is overrated. It's not that big a deal. You will bounce back, and you will learn from it. So I would, and I told my kids that it's like, go try that stuff. You know what? My kids are in their 20s, and I'm like, try that job, move to that town. If it doesn't work out, what's the worst thing that's really going to happen here? You'll get another job. It's okay.
Mm. Mm. Yeah. What vocations have your kids followed out of interest? Have any of them followed in your
My
shoes?
my oldest daughter's in the medical profession. She works at a major hospital in San Francisco in cancer research,
Right.
like that. And my younger daughter's in quality control and food nutrition and things like that, and works for food companies.
Wow, very good. Very good.
Yeah. They're both very
Congratulations.
successful young women. Yeah. They do.
Congratulations.
Thank you. They're wonderful. They're wonderful people out there having a great life.
Rusty, is there anything that I should have asked you that I haven't asked you yet?
I think the only other thing, and you asked me this a little while ago about CEOs and what to tell them, and I think part B to the answer, I'll give that I didn't give earlier is, don't be afraid to reach out to people. I mean, the
Mm.
beauty of this world is we're a lot more connected, a lot more closer to people now. And if you don't understand something, you don't know something, you got a question, reach out. There's an expert, there's a knowledgeable person out there. Mr. C, you don't have to live in a silo. You
Mm.
know, find people, create a network, ask questions. And there's lots of very smart people out there that can help you on your journey.
And I think that's a critical part to that message too, is develop a network to ask the questions, because one of the challenges in reaching out, and I must admit I've actually experienced it myself, is to find the right people to reach out to. There's plenty of gurus and experts around that will tell you all sorts of things. But the ones to find someone that can deliver results and has the track record that if you get some advice, that it's solid and sound advice.
Right.
There's much less of them around than the so-called gurus. So I think that network and and conversations like this, Rusty, where we can get to actually see the behind the scenes and behind the LinkedIn posts of individuals. So thank you.
Yeah, I think
Um,
it's very
i-
valuable. Yeah.
is there anything that you're reading at the moment that you'd recommend, or any books that you have read that you'd put down as
You know
some
what?
career changing?
Yeah. The funny thing is, I tend to read a lot of fiction in the off hours because it's just kind of that, you know, relax away from the work piece. And so I
Nothing
would
wrong with
love to
that.
tell you, yeah, I would love to tell you I'm doing, I bounce in and out of Adam Grant books because I love his organizational work. I think he's got great thoughts around that. I'm a big Malcolm Gladwell fan. I tend to consume more podcasts now around
Yeah.
I'm going to call it the development of organizations, development of person, and things like that.
Mm.
My book reading is really just relaxation. It's like watching cheap Netflix anymore. It's a relaxation mode for me.
Mm. Yeah. Excellent. Is there anything that you've got coming up on the horizon that you'd like to share at all? Anything that you're working on currently, or?
I'm in with a couple of early stage clients, and unfortunately, I cannot talk about what they're working about, right? And I have one company that's in stealth mode, like that. So no, I don't really have anything big to talk about in that world.
That's all right. And then as far as look, I just got to say, it's been a fantastic conversation, quite frankly.
Good, good. I'm glad it was. I'm glad it was helpful.
Hmm. How did you find things on your end?
No, it's great. I love having these conversations out there and being able to share stuff with people. Yeah, and I volunteer inside of a couple of startup incubators just to help people out. So I like this medium to do the same thing. out there. I did startup work in Silicon Valley for 15 years. And so being able to give back is part of what I enjoy doing. And I have conversations every week with people who are not clients. I'm not charging them anything. I may take a pitch review that someone's, raising money, and I'll give them feedback on it. So, I love doing this, and I appreciate the opportunity to do it with you.
And how do you find the work with the startup incubators? What's the biggest challenges they're facing at the moment? I guess, has the environment changed much in the last 12 months for them?
Well, I think the past 12 months, it's really hard to raise money right now.
Yeah.
In the US, compared to 2 years ago or pre-COVID, raising money right now is really hard. And so you're finding people having to be more lean, more efficient in their path. They're not just getting money thrown at them, which is a good thing.
Yeah, I was going to say not such a bad thing.
That's not a bad thing, but it is also.
Yeah, I was going to say not such a bad thing.
There's some really strong companies on the sideline and not being able to really go hit their potential, and that's hard too. Yeah, and then there's just, things fall in and out of favor. So if you're out doing AI something right now, a lot easier to raise money as opposed to what was yesterday's cool thing to invest in. But there's lots of great people doing lots of great work out there. And it's part of, again, why I enjoy being involved in these organizations. You get to see great ideas. And if there's something I can offer back to them as they get their journeys along, then I'm happy to help them out.
All right, great. Excellent. Well, Rusty, I've got to say thank you very much for coming on the chat today. It's been a great conversation, and thanks very much.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate the time today, Terry. Hope you have a good day.
Thank you. You too.